Check, 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 check. All right, good morning. Hello? Can you hear me okay? I mean, you're all pretty close this morning, so good. We are live streaming this, so hopefully people get to tune in. First, I want to thank you. My name is Luke Murray. I'm the chair of the school building committee. Kate Massananti, who's also here, is on the school building committee. I don't see any other members this morning, but we do welcome you. Some of the members could not make it. And I also want to identify, I know it's URI commencement today, and there's a lot of community activities going on. So we're going to try to, hold on. Also the IT person today, so as you can tell. All right. So we're here today to really give an update to the community on where the school building project is. Many of you have already been following it. You may be aware of a lot of what's going on, but many may not, including those who may watch this video later on at their own convenience. I'll start at the beginning. You know, we've been having a multitude of meetings on this project. School building committee has been working very hard to move the project along and follow our charge. And the biggest part is to try to listen throughout the process, be data driven, and listen to the community to ensure that we're creating what we consider the best project we can put forward. I say the best because nothing is perfect. Nothing ever is, but we're trying to really make a project that works for the most. And as Phil will go over today, and he'll show you some concepts, you may agree with components, you may not agree with components. You're welcome to ask questions, and we'll try our best to explain why we came to the decisions we made. Just to get you up to speed, as I said, we have had quite a few meetings on this. We've gone through a data-driven process. We've looked at various sites. We ended up coming back to this location for a high school project. When we had approached council, we came with a variety of different projects, and the priority has always been the high school. When the decision came down to move forward as a project from a financial basis, we presented various buckets of funding. What was approved was $125 million to move forward. And I say by approved, ultimately the approval will come down to you, taxpayers, residents, through a referendum in November. We're planning in a referendum on November 7th. But what council decided to do is allow it to move forward for legislation, which is now at the State House. We anticipate that will be passed to allow us to move forward with that referendum. So with that 125 million, that would be really relegated to the high school because things are expensive. High schools are expensive. And even at that, we're going to have to make some tough decisions moving forward on what's going to stay and what would remain, what would go. But what we do know is we want a high quality project that is, again, best in keeping with community wishes and what we need for the student body. I'm here with Phil Conte from Studio Jade. Many of you have gotten to know him through the process. He's been outstanding. And we're going to continue to work with the Jade team as we move through the upcoming months. Where we're at right now is we've made a lot of the decisions on the project. At some point, we have to make a submission to RIDE, which is called the stage 2. In that stage 2, you have to have a relatively good idea of what you're going to do as far as a project. That includes the building design to a point, any athletic fields or supporting elements to a point, and also other projects. So in addition to the high school, when we submit for the stage 2, which is our approval from RIDE to qualify for additional incentives from the state, because we don't want all this to fall on the local taxpayers, the state will pay a share of this. We're expecting upwards of 52.5% of the project. So that takes a lot of that burden off the taxpayers. But in order to qualify for that money, we have to submit that stage 2 report. It's a process. You go through a stage 1, which is identify the need, stage 2, which we have our projects for authorization, and then stage 3 is where we refine the design. So right now, just understand that the designs we present are not necessarily the finals, but they're a great representation of what we expect to have in the end. And we hope to have in the end, because I think what we're going to show today is pretty exciting. We're expecting that the stage 2 will be going in. We're shooting for end of June. I'm going to push to the couple of weeks of July only because we have to have certain approvals through elected officials, including the school committee and the town council. They have a certain meeting schedule that we have to abide by. So we're going to fall into that sort of schedule over the summer. But that doesn't mean anything gets held up. The actual deadline for the stage 2 is September. So we're well ahead of the curve. We're trying to get in for July because RIDE, quite frankly, is slower during that season, and we want to turn around a faster approval. My goal would be to have some sort of letter from RIDE stating our authorization prior to the vote. If we don't, we'd be like many other districts in the state where we move forward with a referendum without that final letter, but a very good assurity from RIDE as we go through. And we're communicating that we would qualify for those incentives. So that's where we're at right now. Phil and his team are diligently working on designs to get it to the cost estimating phase, which we expect to be soon. I'll let him give an update on that. It will be cost estimated by a professional cost estimator, which is required by RIDE. We've recently completed a survey for both this location and CCMS. We're going to be doing some soil testing, some structural evaluation, all of which is required by that stage 2 and RIDE process. They want to know what is your current building condition and making sure that any proposal that we would put forward is feasible, right? We don't want to go out on site here and find out after an approval that we can't build because the structural soils are not stable enough. So that will all be vetted out over the next couple months. The other things that we're going to be working on just to look out for, information campaign. And I say information because as you get to a referendum, I know the last process got pretty contentious. There's a lot of yes and a lot of no's on both sides. The building committee's job is not to assert a project. It's to inform the public and to make thoughtful decisions. And that's the way we've run it. And that's where I expect it'll be moving forward. So as you see over the next couple months, you're going to see a redeveloped website. You'll see more information being spooned out over the summer into the fall. And our goal is to just provide one source, one credible source of information that you can go to have your questions answered. It's going to take some time. We have, limited resources. We have a small committee, but we are committed to doing that and making sure you have information and the entire community, including those who haven't been so involved in the process, have the information they need to make what they think is the right decision. There's always going to be split on both sides. I think what we ask is base it on the information that we provide, and it's always a value judgment for the community. There is a cost. Some of that cost will be shared by the taxpayer. I know there's a referendum right now and articles in the newspaper, and this this becomes white noise after a while, what gets woven in. I would say don't, and to the community as a whole, don't weave in the building project into this current sort of referendum process. This is, what's going on right now is apart and separate from a building project. And anybody can spin it as they want, but from a building committee standpoint, we have a separate referendum and a separate kind of decision-making process that you'll have to wait for your decisions on. So I ask that you just be patient. Our referendum will be in November, and you can make your decisions accordingly then, based on what we're going to present and moving forward. The last thing I'll say is we are going to be active in the community. We have plans to be on a parade float to basically have this big design on a 22-foot banner, and Phil and his team are working on that to, roll this thing down Main Street and let everyone know, hey, this is here. You're going to have to make a decision, and this is what it's going to look like, prospectively. Come fall, we're going to have some other events. We're trying to tie into the 300th committee, and we'll also be trying to just, again, get that website up and running. Phil's also committed, and I keep asking him for more and more, but I know he's a master model builder, and he told me today he's also a master Lego builder. Apparently built a Lego tower, how high? 111 feet. So, yeah, man of many talents. So we'll be looking for him to build a model of the campus that we can kind of shuttle around so everyone can kind of get down, see what this thing is going to look like. I mean, what we want to do is have everyone truly understand what's going on. There's no questions about the product they're buying because everyone's going to contribute to this effort. You should know what the value of the proposition we're putting forward. With that, I'll introduce Phil. He's got some great stuff for you today, and then we'll follow up with a Q&A. I'm hopeful that we won't have to use the 2 hours today. I know you're all busy on this Saturday. So, Phil.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, everyone, for spending some time with us this morning. So Luke is going to go ahead and run the presentation for me. We're running it through Mentimeter. So it's an interactive presentation. So I would ask you to get your phones out, and you will be prompted with a series of questions throughout the presentation If this is new to some of you, we will walk you through it. It's very simple. It's very fun. So the first thing you will want to do is either try to grab this QR code or go to go back, menti.com. And when they ask for the numerical code, put that number in. So we'll give everybody a couple minutes to get ready. Pardon me? So, well, right now, when you successfully log on, you're really just going to see what you see on the screen, which is the first slide of the presentation. And as we proceed through the presentation, look at your phone for the questions to appear, as well as the entire presentation. This is a lot of fun, gives you something to do other than just look at me. So I want to make sure that those that want to participate are all set. And don't worry, I only have about 100 slides. Just kidding. There's only about 30. Yep, that's all you need to do. Just get it up on your phone. It's just going to look like that until we start. So is there anybody that is struggling or we think we're all set? One person needs another minute. Let me see. Let me see if IT support is on its way. All you will see on your screen is basically what you see right here until we start. All right. Any new guests? Maybe you can maybe help them along the way, or they can help with you. All right. Are we ready? Okay, let's go ahead to the next slide, Luke. Everybody sees this cover slide on their phone? Yes? Okay, all right. So welcome. Thank you very much. Next slide, Luke. So this is our agenda for today. We want to update you on the high school project. As Luke had mentioned, there are other district-wide needs that have been identified, but really this focus is on a new high school project. We're going to show you some site plans and concept renderings of the new high school, as well as the proposed athletic fields at Curtis Corner. We'll talk about next steps and then welcome questions, comments, or concerns. Next. Okay, this is your first question. How would you describe the school facilities planning process over the last year? Thorough and responsive, adequate and acceptable, rushed and preconceived. Now, we recognize this is but a small sampling of your entire community. So this is meant to be somewhat informative for us because obviously you're interested. You have come out on a Saturday. So we want to get as much information as we can. And Luke had mentioned possibly turning this into a survey that we could distribute to the entire community for more feedback. We have been very successful with surveys in your community. There has been a lot of responsiveness, so we appreciate that. All right, next slide, Luke. So we're going to start with some renderings and site plans of the high school, but I want everyone to familiarize themselves with the existing condition. Orient yourself. This is a Google Earth image that shows the existing school in the upper left-hand corner, Columbia and School Streets, the Hazard Building, and the Hazard Field, and the adjacent residences and streets. So just orient yourself to this so you have an idea. The next image is going to be our proposed site plan. So something to keep in mind here, you will see that we're basically land swapping. The hazard field will be relocated to where the existing high school is upon its demolition. And while the existing school remains operational, new high school would be constructed in Hazard Field, parallel to School Street. You'll see that we've tried to maintain all of the site circulation close to the building, giving adequate buffers between the neighbors on the right side of this screen, maintaining the hazard field as open as possible with no particular loop road around there, but a walking trail, particularly for students that do park remotely, walk up, and would come across the field to the school. The school does face School Street. It is linear in shape. We're trying to be as compact as possible. We do want to be mindful of the relationship to Hazard Building and make a connection between those two buildings through a small community plaza that you see in the left-hand corner of the building. We wanted to make sure that there was clear delineation for bus drop-off, parent drop-off, and making it as condensed as possible. Next slide. The existing. So we would anticipate that along the long axis of the field, that there is probably a transition between a lower field and an upper field. That makes sense. I'll walk over and point.
Yeah, I'll qualify that too, because we haven't decided that. The survey plan just came back and the grading, so we could either plateau the site and keep an embankment towards Brown Street. And it would be a larger embankment, or we could tier the field. So depending on what the athletic needs are, which we have to review again, if there's a need to plateau that field, make sure we have one open space, we have that opportunity. Maybe a little bit more grading, but we can do it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So that's what we have options, but we want to make sure that whatever we do is in conjunction with what's recommended for the athletic program.
Yeah, so the comment was for people that are listening is that they would like to see the outline of the existing school on this. So when we post this final presentation with the survey, we'll go ahead and put that outline on. The existing building at its closest point during construction is about 25 feet. New construction comes close to this existing building, maintaining all the necessary egress. But I just want to make sure you anticipate that we are building closely to here. And typically that would not be a problem here, because this side of the building between the auditorium and the cafeteria, these are not the core academic spaces. So having construction that would at one point come close to here, it's not going to be disruptive to the teaching and learning that would be happening within the building. Sure, we're not anticipating any direct connection to Hazard. During construction, the site logistics need to be maintained for Hazard and the high school. So we do not anticipate any disruption there. And then on a project of this scale, where you're looking at construction that's almost, 20 to 24 months, there are opportune times to do construction that would be disruptive or that would need to be managed in response to the existing buildings. All right, so the next question was, do you feel your voice has been heard throughout the process? So we're certainly glad to see that type of response. So for those who came in late, may I suggest that you go to www.
www.menti.com, and the code, when you're ready, or if you need it, let me know. I can read it out. Does anybody need to connect into Menti at this time? Don't be bashful. All right. So it looks like we're okay. We'll move forward.
All right. Great. Thank you, Luke. Next slide. So what we're going to show you are a series of renderings of the design that has been developed thus far. And this is concept level. This is one of the images from School Street. You see the hazard, you see a little bit of the hazard building to the left, and you start to see basically the academic core of the building, as well as the main entrance starts to reveal itself along School Street. Next slide. This is just a close-up of that one particular area. We wanted you to see that we're starting to try to make that plaza connection on the back side of the building between Hazard and the new high school. We also want to be mindful of some gifts that were previously donated from earlier classes of SK. Next. This is a view from the other end of School Street. As you're coming up onto the site, we're trying to break the mass of the building down as we start approaching the residential area. Typical materials here are brick, some accents of stone, some metal panel, trying to be economical in its use, but also be contextual to the area. Next slide. This is a view from, we'll say, a student walking along the walking path. You see the gym, the bus entrance for students coming along this side. This is the view from the fields. Next. This is the view if you're coming down Columbia. One of the things that we need to be mindful here is this building really does not have a back, right? You've got a face that is on School Street. You've got a face that is going to be on the fields. And then you have the ends that face your neighbors and one that faces the current Hazard building. Next slide. This is an image of that plaza that we talked about developing in the transition space between the Hazard building and the new high school. We know that the arts is an important part here. Maybe that plaza develops into a small outdoor amphitheater or performance area, a place for students to wait as they're getting on a bus, getting off a bus. It's also adjacent to, you see on the left, the senior dining area, which is outside the cafeteria. Next. So, be honest, I will not take this personally. I have a big team that does all of this hard work. It's certainly not me. So I will not be offended. The academic tower is 3 stories. Then it goes to 2 stories and then single story as we approach the neighbors.
That brick portion that you're looking at there is the 3-story academic core.
Yes, this will be a slab on grade. We do not anticipate a basement or lower level. So we're currently looking at the feasibility for adding geothermal here. The HVAC system approach is what we're currently looking at. There are various options from VRF to geothermal. We're exploring them as we're going through this process now. And as I mentioned, we're finishing up a feasibility study for a geothermal concept.
It's a good question. One thing that we did discuss a couple meetings ago as a building committee is looking at ways to tackle green building design. And so to Phil's credit, he brought on a sub-consultant who specializes in geothermal and other types of HVAC systems to give us an analysis of both the feasibility and the cost that would be affiliated with that.
Yes, we would anticipate bus drop off and pickup being on the field side, parent drop off and pickup being on the school street side in opposing one-way directions. So we're limiting interaction between buses and parents. Oh, no, this is complete custom project, particularly given the constraints of the site. One of the exercises that we went through was a programming phase where we had our educational facility planners meet with the staff and the administration, understand what their needs are. Then we're working that into the building design. And then if you recall, some of you may have participated in a robust aesthetic exercise on what everyone felt would fit within the community of South Kingstown. And we took feedback from that, certainly our own design experience and expertise, worked that with the program to come with a very custom high school design. But it has all the amenities that you would expect, right? Core classrooms, small group breakout spaces, cafeterias, gyms, auditorium. The plan that we are presenting to RIDE does include an 800 seat auditorium, which is a little bit bigger than what they would typically recommend. 725.
One thing I wanted to mention is the building committee and to Phil's credit, we out of the community form feedback and everyone had different designs. Some had courtyards in the middle, some had it closer to the hazard, some had it farther. I think the approach has been to make it as compact as possible because we realize one, there are neighbors. It is in a neighborhood. Two, make it more efficient. Part of this is, people talk about budget. Part of this and what we'll be also rolling out is the operational savings over time. We haven't gotten there yet, but we will. And we're going to have cut sheets on what the impact is budgetarily moving forward in a long term. But as you make things more compact, things get closer, it becomes a more logical building design to the point where we're going to be seeking a waiver from RIDE for the bus drop off. That was mentioned. RIDE recommends or their preferred standard is what's called Chevron parking. It's a very big area dedicated only to bus drop off. I typically do not like it. I've worked on building these types of designs. There's differing opinions. I think part of it was for air quality next to the building. But if you think about it, those buses are there 5-10 minutes max in the morning, dropping off and gone. It's a very large pavement area. So you get into stormwater mitigation, intrusiveness on neighbors, others. So we're going to be seeking a waiver to have much as similar, longer, but similar to what we have now, which is a drop off lane. Buses will drop off and it can also be used for internal site circulation, ambulances, anything emergency, things like that, which seems much more logical given how compact our site is.
Typically, it's been our experience that that is not a cost-effective way to proceed. And for one of the simple reasons is that you're asking a design team today to engineer a structure that may or may not have an additional load on it. Then you're asking a design team 10 years, 15 years from now to say the original design team did that and they're ready for you. There's a way too much liability and it adds to the cost initially. It's probably appropriate to plan for an addition if you had to at that point. Instead of going up, you would either step forward or step left. All right, next slide. So let's talk about the proposed athletic fields at Curtis Corner. Next slide. So again, I want you to orient yourself with the existing Curtis Corner Middle School site along Curtis Corner Road. Notice where the fields are, where the building is. We will be anticipating demolishing that school in its entirety for the site plan that we're going to show next. Yeah.
Can I give one thing for context? on
Sure.
this? So I want everyone to realize, and you, if you weren't involved in some of the discussions, we've done wetland flagging on this site. Part of the data process was, or when we were looking at it as a school site, how big of a site do we actually have? Because wetland standards, this was built, this site was never really considered from that wetland basis. We know it floods, we know the field floods. It's in a low-lying area. Half of that field currently lies within either in wetlands area or the buffer, the new regulated buffer. So part of the decision-making process through this was, okay, it's great that it's there now, but we know there's issues. How do we kind of unravel or make that situation better? So just so you understand, as we get into the designs, you'll see we're trying to bring that field to the upland portion and get it out of those wetland environments.
So this is the proposed field with additional parking, additional pickleball courts. We're maintaining the admin building in its current position in the lower left-hand corner for orienting yourself. You'll also see that we're proposing an area for a future field house. Now, I cannot be any clearer when I say this. The field house is not, say not, and for the third time, not part of this campaign. However, it would be important to master plan where a field house could go in the future. We want to give it a site that's prominent and that is functional for this layout. We did orient the field in its proper orientation of north-south. That field has an 8-lane track. It can fit soccer, obviously football, and we have the bleachers on the west side for basically all attendees, which is the proper location for bleachers, certainly for the home team, right? Usually we put the visitors on the east side so they have to look at the sun, but we're not going to that level here. We're putting everybody on the right, on the best side to view any activity. We do have the wetland buffer line identified here. That is that white line that goes across the top and down the bottom a little bit. That is the most restrictive buffer line. The buffer line may be a little farther back, but we wanted to show you that we're keeping everything within the most restrictive buffer. And you quickly see with the parking in the field that this is relatively a full use of this site. Of everything you can use on this site, it is built for a stadium like this. It maintains access to the fields in the back. It maintains connection to the bike path. And there is obviously a loop road here so that you can park in multiple places and get to the fields in the back or the stadium in the front. We really liked the way this is developed. We've had a couple revisions. We worked with the Rec Commission, had an opportunity to weigh in previously. They have not yet seen this revised design, but we're anxious to show it to them. Go ahead. I would say it will be at whatever level it needs to be. We're certainly not down in the lower level. Where your existing field is now is where that proposed parking lot is partially in the upper right-hand corner. As Luke had mentioned, your existing field goes beyond that white dotted line now. It's likely that it will be raised up.
Yeah, it's likely we're gonna have to bring in some fill to raise that site.
Yes. No, 8 lanes all the way around with areas for, if you can see it, maybe on your phone. I don't know if you can zoom in on your phone when you look at the image, but you'll see we have high jump and long jump. We would anticipate that javelin and hammer throwing could be in the fields beyond where they're currently at. Yeah. This is planned for a turf field. Yes.
By turf, we mean synthetic.
Synthetic. Yeah, we have to be clear. Yes, synthetic. So there are a number of techniques available to the site civil design team on how to manage that. I would expect that it would be in underground storage containment systems underneath of the parking area. But there are stringent regulations with stormwater management. So upon a successful bond vote and approval to move forward, there will be much more design and engineering associated with this entire site to make sure that stormwater is managed.
One thing I'll chime in a little bit. Many of you, I've said this before. I'm actually a registered landscape architect. My previous life was actually doing a lot of designs for these types of fields. If you picture that field in a synthetic turf environment, it's about typically 18 to 24 inches of crushed stone. It's open face stone. They drain very quickly. They absorb water very quickly. There's usually much more additional capacity under that field and elsewhere to go underground injection. So picture that instead of draining directly into the wetland, which it does now, and just sheet flows. And if you know anything about drainage, you have to look at pre and post. Your precondition is the existing building footprint, all the parking that exists now, which is impervious area. So what DEM says, you have to at least match pre and post conditions. I'm pretty confident we're going to well exceed the standard with the underground injection and the system that we could provide here. So to the point, I actually think it'll reduce flooding in the areas because we're going to be pointing the drainage interior of the site and going down with it as opposed to dumping it into the wetland and letting it go where it does right now. So this may solve multiple issues. I know there's some flooding downstream that is of concern with the new stormwater management. I'm sure we'll work with the civil team, but I'm absolutely certain we can make a better condition.
Yes. Yes. Not the field house.
So as I mentioned earlier, we offered to the council various buckets of potential money, right? 125 and 150 was our higher ends, and what got approved was 125. At the 150 level, we anticipated with a more surety that we'd be able to move the admin building over to a renovated hazard and be able to eliminate that box. Since we are at our reduced level, I'll call it reduced because it wasn't our highest ask, we're having to look at options. One option is to keep the building in place, as you see on this design. If we can get the high school cost control to a point where we can do a renovation here or in the future, then we'll plan on moving admin here. But right now, we want to be honest with the community and saying this building may have to remain because we just don't have the funds available to move it. And that's the situation we're in. We won't know until we get cost data back. And quite frankly, we may not even know until we're into the project with the way things are right now with construction costs.
The distance between the seating and the field, I don't know I do not know the exact dimension. However, I could tell you that we have a number of installations that look very similar to this. In fact, the question about whether this was custom or a standard one, when it comes to a field and bleachers and track, that's pretty standard. Those dimensions are really already set. So I'd probably say we have that has not been completely flushed out yet. No pun intended.
Where there was a discussion of whether we could use the existing admin building in some capacity. I don't know on that. Again, that's money for renovations and whatnot. The field house, just so everyone understands why, I mean, obviously one is just cost on the field house. The other is that RIDE does not reimburse for field houses. So we wouldn't get that 52.5% on the field house, which really, at this point, we're trying to maximize those reimbursements, like get whatever is reimbursable on the table. We know a field house might be something for future. Worst case scenario, you're looking at portable toilets. So that would be an option. So we'll be kind of moving through the process of decision making on that.
I think the next slide is a rendering of this. That just gives you a better perspective of what we're thinking. We think it's important to have an area for buses, right? This new facility could entertain tournaments and larger competitions. We wanted to make sure there was adequate bus parking, general parking, access to the field. You certainly see how a future field house could really turn this into a first-class destination for sporting activities. Okay, be honest. I don't have the exact quantity. We certainly could easily determine that, but I could tell you it is more. Okay, next slide. So let's talk about schedule and next steps. Go ahead, Luke. So a lot of this is a recap of what Luke said. We submitted the RIDE stage 1, which identified the need. And that stage 1 was approved by RIDE. SK was invited to submit the stage 2, which is what we're doing. And then the goal for the stage 2 is to determine what is the solution to that need. So RIDE recognizes, yes, you have facility needs at the high school. What is your solution? We've shown you concepts of those solutions, and we will be challenged by them. You know, they'll ask, why this option? We have to defend our option. Did we explore other alternatives? Is this the most cost-effective approach to respond to the needs? That's what we're working on in our stage 2. That's what a lot of the meetings that we've been conducting forward have been about. And I do appreciate all of the participation and feedback from the school building committee and the community in general. Go to the next slide, Luke. So as Luke had mentioned, we are developing and starting to estimate the project, right? We do recognize that there are other district needs that were identified. This stage 2 is due September 15th, but we anticipating submitting it by the end of June. But as Luke had mentioned, it may carry over into July simply because we need to have these 3 things happen. We need school building approval, we need school committee approval, and we need town council approval to submit. And as we approach the summer months, it gets a little bit more difficult to fit them in, making sure we have quorums, et cetera. But we are certainly on track. All right, another question. Has the overall process over the last year been engaging and transparent? All right, next slide. Yes. Sure. So we have developed a floor plan. We do not have it here to present today. I can tell you that we're designing the building for 725 students. It is it recognizes all of the CTE pathways that you currently have. And RIDE has guidelines on the types of spaces that need to be in a new high school. They have a formula for the size of the new high school. What we did in our programming sessions was to see what is unique about South Kingstown's curriculum that we need to either supplement RIDE's guidance or be different than RIDE's guidance, which is fine as long as we can explain why we have been different. Part of the stage 2 includes a robust section on the educational specifications, how it influences the facilities, the size of the spaces, the number of the spaces, and of course, the floor plan and layout of the spaces. We have presented the floor plans in previous meetings to the school building authority, or I'm sorry, to the school building committee. One of the things that the administration commented on, one of the most important things to them, in that they recognize we will give them all the spaces they need. But how are those spaces organized so that the administration could quickly and safely circulate through the building in the event of an emergency and the flow of students? And we had the opportunity to share that with the principal. I don't want to speak for Chip, but during that meeting, Chip was absolutely satisfied that we have provided a floor plan that is very simple, very safe to maneuver through. The existing high school, if you've been through this school, very circuitous. Additions is very difficult to get anywhere. You will see in that floor plan that it is a very clean, very clear circulation path. So I don't want to tell you to trust me that we have it in there, but we will have documentation that shows you that we've included those spaces and obviously the floor plans.
Phil, if I could, and I want to repeat the question for the video. It's basically how we haven't really seen anything to the educational impact of the facility design interior of the building. It's a very astute and correct, right? We have been focused on more of the box, the elements, the general fit, right? We know a lot of the things interior need to be developed further. From a cost aspect of where we're at in our current stage, we're really trying to get the RIDE. Okay, this is what we're going for. Phil has, and he hasn't mentioned it, but he's had open sessions with the teachers. He's had all day sessions with the teachers. He's had all day sessions with Chip. He's going to continue that. And at some point, whether he continues with this project or not, because we expect that we're going to go out to RFP for a stage 3 architect, that architect will then carry the ball forward even further. For this phase, prior to the bond though, we will have interior images of what this perspective would look like. We've already seen some. So like a grand staircase going up from the eating area where admin would be, placement of the classrooms, sharing of labs, explaining how that would work. So we have more to do. Even now, we have months until we get to the bond referendum. So we will be putting that out there 100%. But just know that even that won't be the final design. We'll get into stage 3. We'll continue to tweak. But the biggest thing we're going to continue to do is keep listening to the administrators, to the teachers on what they need to provide educational adequacy not just from a RIDE perspective, because I agree, like, just because RIDE said, here's the minimum threshold, doesn't mean that's adequate for our community, right? So we want to make sure that we're responsive to SK and the needs. And I think that really has to come from the people who are in the building every single day. And also the school committee and others who drive the project. You know, we're looking for those input. So you're absolutely correct. There's just more work to do. I'll let Phil take the.
Go ahead, Doral.
The questions, do we have a comparison of square footage versus new and old? So,
So I believe the existing building is over 200,000 square feet. I want to say it's maybe 215,
say
235.
230.
So the existing building is 235,000 square feet. We are in the range of about 147 to 150,000 square feet. So it's a much more compact building, which is what you want when you're building a new structure. And just to dump on what Luke said as well regarding the quality of the spaces. It's important to keep in mind that not only do you need the 21st century types of spaces to enhance teaching and learning, you also need to make sure those spaces are properly climate controlled. They have the proper acoustics, the proper lighting, the proper indoor air quality. All those things impact the students as well. Some of those things are currently challenged in this existing building. So it's both the educational adequacy, but also the environment. So you're absolutely correct. And we look forward to sharing that. Yes. No, I think there's. Yeah. So one more question, then we'll go to the next screen.
We'll have an opportunity for additional questions after. I just want to, we are videoing this, so they're just seeing the screen right now. So. Yeah. So the question is, you know, are we going to bring in student input? The answer is yes. We've talked preliminarily with Chip about getting student input, but we need to, and we need to actually start doing that soon. I think, did you want to speak, Kate?
I'd also like to share that the school committee just had a large strategic planning meeting last week with a large population of our student body, so that we are gathering their input as well as the teachers at the middle school level. And we're tapping into the younger kids. Now, we want obviously the kids who live here right now, right? My son's a senior and he doesn't go to the bathroom in this school, right? He comes home and has since day one. So all of that is being taken into consideration, and they are listening to we are listening to the kids. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, next slide. So do you feel this is the right time for this project? All right. Next question.
Phil, there's
Oh.
one thing I want to say about this particular slide. I know there's going to be banter going forward about whether this is the right time, and we've expressed the value of the incentives that are currently available. So, we keep repeating this, but essentially there's additional incentives for RIDE. If we were to do this a year from now, we'd be at 35% base housing rate, which means they're only picking up 35%. That's weighted against current inflation and the construction market. There's articles in the newspaper right now that about projects that were approved 3 years ago that are now under construction that have had either been held up or under value engineering, et cetera. We know the environment we're in. We get it. One thing about the approval process is it takes an extraordinary amount of time, and this community knows better than anybody because we've gone through it multiple times. It's been years. And during the time that it's taken, costs have only increased markedly. And so just to get through the approval process is a feat in itself. If a project does not move forward, and this isn't a threat or anything else, it's happened. We start back at zero. We have to start back at the very beginning. You can always prepare a project for approval, have it approved from RIDE, have a bond approved, and hold that bond. If prospectively costs continue to get out of control and there's a decision by council, you know what, we're going to hit pause. No bonds will be issued until council approves them to move forward with the bond issuance. So just because I want to be clear on this, just because the voter public says yes, you're giving an authorization only. The actual issuance of the bonds will not occur until such time we need them. And even when we need them, that will take time itself. This is a 3-year potential construction project. So who knows what's going to happen in 3 years? Go back to 07. In 06, 07 early, economy was booming. Inflation was up. Everyone was buying houses. By 08, 09, it had tanked. If you think of an approval, the approval could have happened in 06. And by the time you're constructing, it's 08, 09, and everything basically fell out of the market. Interest rates were low, the whole bit. So what we're taking an approach on and just asking everyone to look at is don't conflate the approvals that are being done now with the actual project implementation. There's multiple steps in the decision process on how this rolls forward. Just think about that because I'm getting feedback from people. Is this the right time? Inflation's high, construction costs are high. Yes, they are. But we're prospecting on that they'll go down, or we're prospecting on, okay, if we lose these incentives, things will get better. And I don't know if that's the case. It's a tough decision to make. So we're just following the process out.
Next. Doral.
And any other public allowed students in public high schools in Rhode Island to attend other public high schools if they have a CTE program that your school does not have. So for instance, this year we have over 50 students down in Narragansett. And we have our usual complement of students that go to Cheraho, including my oldest grandson, because what it used to be a Voc Tech school, they still have those studies there. So we have a bunch of students going there. We have some students in North Kingstown. If or when this new high school opens up, we're hoping that students that have left South Kingston to go elsewhere will then stay home. And if they do, for instance, this fall, it's expected that for every student that leaves the district, $20,000 goes with them. So if you could bring back 50 students, it would save your school district $1 million a year. If you could bring back 100, it would be 2 million. And that money could be used to cover some of the debt, the annual debt on the bonds, and make it so that the projected tax rate increases won't be as hard on taxpayers.
That's actually a good point. And part of what we're looking at is, I said to Phil this morning as he looked out onto the fields and he was standing there prior to coming in, if you build it, they will come. We truly feel that we will attract a lot of the student population to stay. And essentially, stay in district, stay with our sports, stay with our team. And keep in mind, construction goes hand in hand. This is a catalyst. We're hoping that curriculum and other things in the school district continue to coalesce around this. It's not just about a building project. These things are a catalyst for others.
All right.
Well.
Next question. Now, this allows you to enter your own response. So what more information do you need before the bond vote? And any word you type in, be mindful, will likely show up on the screen. So you would, where it says enter a word, go ahead and touch that bar. There. And then you can type. So RIDE, I don't want to say regulates, but RIDE manages what school departments have CTE programs. So if a neighboring community already had a program, RIDE would not support South Kingstown having that same program. So
I will counter a little bit on that because so RIDE has changed. It used to be more regional career and tech. So I grew up in Coventry. We had an enormous career and tech program. It was serving all of Central Rhode Island. Several years back, when things changed where they, and this was Pontigansett really led the charge on pathways programs, which are hybrid programs. Essentially, you take classes in something much like a college degree and you can get out with that specialty. It's been disruptive because what Pontigansett realized is for a much lower cost, you do not have to build out these extensive facilities. You offer these programs and you call them career pathways. And so that the trend has been for schools now that they're competing for funding when the formula changed in 2010, essentially setting up these new programs. And sometimes they do overlap. Carpentry is offered in many different districts. There's a lot of different programs that are still there. I think the trend is going to be much like colleges. You see it at URI. They're moving towards engineering, certain specialties. Districts are going to look left and right and try to offer specialties others don't. And then keep what they can in district. If there are students who are seeking other programs that we just don't offer, they will go there. I think what we're seeking is a balance of inflow and outflow. What you don't want is to have too much outflow to districts because you don't offer anything or you don't offer those opportunities. What you ideally want is, ideally you get a plus, but is a net zero. And so it's complicated, but it is something that we're considering on this because when people talk about budgets and they say, well, why should I put an investment in this? It's part of the equation. It's part of trying to balance the budget because when you have $5 to $8 million going out of district, that's $5 or $8 million that is not being reinvested in the schools. Huh? going to rephrase real quick for the video is, have you gotten any input, feedback on why the kids are leaving? And responding. So Kate?
So that is, to just put it in perspective, as far as the school building committee, no, right? But the schools, yes. So the school administration team, we've charged them with that multiple times. You can't force someone to answer. But we often, a lot of them, they are legitimate. We have 4 CTEs. If there's a cosmetology program, we don't have it, but we're not going to build it. Right. So there is going to be attrition for certain things. Welding, we don't have it. Right. Agriculture, we should have it. We don't. Maybe we will. But so right now we have carpentry, as long as our program stay intact. We have carpentry, we have digital arts, computer studies, and the CNA biomedical, and they're thriving, they're robust, they're wonderful. Perfect. We do ask why people leave. Some people tell us, and it is specifically, I want to go into the farming over in Narragansett. Others, quite frankly, will say because my son wants to play basketball and isn't going to make this team, so he's going to make that team, and not even exaggerating. So it just depends. But a lot of the feedback is the physical building. To your point, kids can't go to the bathroom, right? So.
Sure. It was 7:25. That's fine. So RIDE has a specific formula on the size of the building, and it's based off of a projected enrollment within 5 years from now that was completed by a demographics group. That is the number that RIDE will support. I can tell you that number is less than 725. We are trying to make an argument in the stage 2 for 725 students for some of the reasons you just mentioned and for reasons that we heard elsewhere. They will be defining and deciding that number, but we are arguing for as much as we reasonably think we can get for South Kingstown.
Can I speak to that? Sorry, I'm dominating. I'm sorry. So there's a couple things when it comes to the enrollment piece, is that the idea isn't there's 100 students who have left. We want them back because they're not coming back. They're gone. We want to keep the folks that are coming up from exiting, and less kids are coming up. So lower birth rate, lower families with young kids in our community, because the cost is prohibitive, obviously. So it is based on not just the current enrollment, but the future projected enrollment from babies all the way up. So there's a whole study that, like you said, the demographic took place.
Last thing I'll chime in is the building committee is in charge of the box, right? And so this is why it's helpful to have Kate and Paula here from the school committee. I see Carol. And so we're all, ideally, the committee is driving the academics portion of this. We're in charge of the box. But one thing about CTs today is there's less emphasis on the built-ins. It's kind of like science labs, right? You used to have the Bunsen burners with the counters and all the built-in stuff. These are open spaces that can be converted, very flexible to different programs. So even over time, these things could convert to different programs and be different specialties. So, as Kate said, they're looking at that. And I would expect that the school committee is going to tell us what they'd like in the box, and the architect and working with the administrative team and teachers to say, this is where we want to focus, right? And whether that converts from the existing programs to others, I don't think is going to change the spatial layout extremely, to an extreme. I think it's going to just be what fits within that spatial element, if that makes sense. So the fixtures and furnishings may change. So if you think of a nursing focus and EMS focus versus maybe machine welding, yes, you need some additional plugs, you need some little different fixtures and furnishings, but you can make that work within that type of environment.
All right, next question.
RIDE decides how many CTE programs you can have, as well as what CTE programs you can have. So any new CTE program, or I use this for an example, we wanted to try to integrate preschool into our new existing different classes high school. That had to go and be approved by RIDE. Like, we can't just say we're gonna add this program and it's gonna be okay to add it. It has to go through RIDE. RIDE determines much of what we're able to do inside of these schools in regards to programs such as CTE.
Next question, Luke.
Just real quick, so to address some of the things that are here, what you need to make an informed vote. So funding, we put some numbers out there. We're going to continue to tighten up the numbers, and we will be putting that out there. What is the impact? If you were to vote, there's obviously going to be an impact. We're not looking to shield that impact. What we want to do is put forward what you're getting for your money, right? What's the value proposition? A lot of this is around education. As I mentioned, the school committees also, I'm expecting that the school committee is going to be continue putting out there, this is the educational value impact of this, because again, the building committee can only kind of address the box. The educational academic components, while we're working with that team, really has to be addressed by them and the administration. Tax implications, educational capabilities, cost estimates are coming. Separate cost estimator than Studio Jade. We will also have an owner's project manager onboarded soon, which we're working through the process. And that expectation is that OPM will also be looking at the cost. One thing when it comes to cost estimation, nothing is ever perfect. It's an estimate, but what we're going to try to do is tighten up the numbers and get a project that we know is feasible going in, as opposed to closing our eyes. And we fought for this, right? We already fought because the RIDE calculation is lower as far as the reimbursement, but we said, no, we're going to go in with the higher number because we anticipate that the real cost is going to be higher. And we want to be honest with the public on what the real price tag would be, so we don't have to come back. And that's the goal. So many of this we'll take this list into account as we start to push out information.
Thank you, Luke. So this is a slide on how much information do you feel that you need before the bond vote? And it's sort of a range. And you can vote on sliding the bar on each particular topic of whether you have enough information or you need more information.
How many students for Broad Rock? Is that what you're asking? I think we're 700.
I would be.
If I remember
would be
correctly.
Guessing right now.
Yeah, because we're not where the school district is obviously consolidating, and I know this has come up, but we can get that number. It's been discussed. Yeah, we know that number. Yeah. Okay. This has been discussed in context because we know we're merging the schools and it's going to be close on projected enrollment versus the building capacity, but then it's projected, the enrollment's projected to decrease and become more comfortable over time, but so I'm not stemming any conversation, but I want to keep it respectful to Phil and make sure we're rolling along. We can have these debates for sure. And trust me, we've had a lot of, to your point, we've gone through looking at options. I mean, if you want to go back to the meetings, this is why we record them. There's a lot of discussion and decision making that has been sort of wrung out on these issues. It wasn't like, hey, let's build a new high school, let's go. It's been, what do we need and what made logical sense? And as you can see, it's been a process. We're already reducing the amount of schools. South Road has been sitting there. We expect Wakefield to be offloaded, CCMS. So this is part of a larger effort for sure.
So responses to this are helpful for us as we move forward. Yes. $125 million is the project cost, which includes both hard costs and soft costs. Yeah, yes, all at project cost. When we say project cost, we mean the entire project.
How much would we recycle from the school?
From a construction standpoint, so, well, no, RIDE reimburses furniture, fixtures, and equipment, as well as technology for new construction. Their expectation would be that a new building has new furnishings since they reimburse for it. I'm not sure there is much here that could be reused, maybe some specialty CTE equipment and stuff like that that currently exists. But for example, this furniture, no, you would have new furniture. These tables and chairs would not be reused.
So folding tables, things like that. I mean, listen, we're talking $125 million project, and a $50 table. I'm not saying it's not important, but I think what we're going to look at is the new style of learning requires a little different fixtures. A lot of it is portable, movable, different, right? We used to have fixed desks with, probably in many of these classrooms, fixed desks and the way they're situated. So it's a cost consideration, right? Part of cost containment is saying, all right, what could we reuse and what do we have to buy new? Things like this, yeah, we can reuse folding tables, but if it's fixtures in the classroom that are 30 years old, we're probably not going to salvage that. It's probably going to be surplused out or whatever we can get for it. Right. And I think that's what we'll do. We'll take a common sense approach. We're not, I don't want the feeling to be that it's like we have this money, the taxpayers are giving us this money, let's go blow it. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think if anything, we're going to have to cost contain the project. I think 125 million in this day and age to build a new high school is reasonable, but going to be tight. It's going to force us into some decisions on fixtures and furnishings and going down the floor tiles, ceiling tiles, everything. And looking at life cycle costs. These are the difficult decisions that the building committee, that's when the real work gets done. Phil knows this.
Yeah.
When we're starting to think about, geez, do we go with that thing that's going to last 15 years or 30? But it's an upfront cost now and we have to contain cost. I mean, that's difficult decisions to make, but we'll make them.
Yes.
So you want to kick this one to me?
Yeah.
too?
Okay.
So we have, early on in the project, looked at that. I mentioned we had options for funding. One was 150. So where we're at now is the improvements that we'd be looking to include in the stage 2 for approval to ensure that we qualify for the ride reimbursement are primarily maintenance oriented, warm, safe and dry, right? So that might be repainting, ceiling tiles, floor tiles. A lot of it is in place. To go up the upgrades, HVAC is a big one. So I think it's less flashy. There's less to show. It'll be in, so everyone's clear on this. We will be including all of those projects. So we may present projects upwards of 150 to 175 in the stage 2 report. That doesn't mean we're going to move forward with those. If we were to get money after the project, there's a lot of money floating around on grants. If there's cuts and the school district says, hey, we have capital funding, those projects would then potentially qualify for that reimbursement, that 52.5%. That's a 5-year approval period. So the priority emphasis is going to be on the high school, obviously for the 125 million, but we want to be sure that we set ourselves up for those additional reimbursements because we don't want to be short-sighted and move forward with just the high school in our stage 2. And then we find, oh, there's money out there. We received 10 million. We can go to Peacedale or we can go to West Kingston and do these upgrades. But for purposes of the crowd here and the community, I think we're going to have to speak to it more than we show it because it's a lot of things like you'd typically see on your house, the roof, the walls, the things that have to get done, not the things you want to get done.
So Luke is being a little bit nicer than I'll be because we went with $125 million bond instead of the 150. Our other schools don't get a lot of the bigger aesthetic upgrades. So we just are sticking with maintenance and necessary upgrades, updates. And because we have 25 million less dollars to navigate. Correct, yes.
Everyone's aware, right? It does have a requirement and we are going to have to address this in the budget moving forward at some point. RIDE requires 3% of your total operational budget to go to maintenance of buildings. And we typically have skirted that, because most school districts haven't invested in maintenance. And so I wanted to mention that because one of the things we're going to also get questioned on is, well, why would I give you money if you're going to continue to not maintain the building? And the answer is, well, now we're forced to, because what happens is if you don't, eventually RIDE comes in and scoops your housing aid. So that money that we attribute to a bond, which we don't have a lot of housing aid coming in right now because we haven't done a lot of projects. If we were to bond this big of an amount, we're going to count on the state reimbursement to put towards the bond payment each year. If they were to scoop that money, that means it falls back on the taxpayer again. So over time, we are going to have to increase our funding into the bucket for capital to ensure that we're meeting that 3% requirement, which is good. It's what we should do. We should be maintaining the buildings so we don't have to go through this process. Unfortunately, we're paying for the sins of the past now. I'll defer to Phil to facilitate.
Go ahead, Doral.
The problem, in my opinion, the problem with the $125 million maximum is that you don't have a buffer. Your buffer becomes Curtis putting a new field at Curtis Corner is what the high school buffer is. So if the cost to build the high school you want, and you don't want to cut costs, and if it comes to the fact that we wouldn't be able to do what we want to do over at Curtis Corner, that's the boat we're in, which is why over these past months, I've gone to meeting after meeting and said we should have stayed with 150 because that extra $25 million between now and the end of the year, RIDE gives us 52.5% back. Next year, it's 35.
All right, next slide, Luke. If asked today, will you be supporting the $125 million school construction bond?
Talk about your loaded questions, Phil. Please.
All right, next question. And that was it. I'm sorry, no more questions, but now we want to give you opportunities to comment and ask questions. We should probably have, he's gonna do it. Great, thank you. Thank you for that. Wait for the mic, please.
Thank you. Can you point to a project that's been built in the area within the last year? Or that's comparable in scale that was accomplished for this amount of money?
So there are under construction right now is Rogers High School in Newport. Larger than this building. That is being built for 775 students. That does have a culinary CTE program, and they are just coming out of the ground with foundations. Their ride stage 2 was reduced by ride than the amount that was asked for, right? We're going to be submitting a package for maybe
And they're, yes, and they're kind of going crazy right now with their value engineering
correct. They're struggling.
process. They're struggling.
We have taken a much more conservative approach to coming up to the 125. As Doral mentioned, it is tight, and as Luke had mentioned, it is tight. But that exceeds the ride formula already.
Mhm.
So we're trying to be as prudent as possible moving forward.
Sure thing. And their project doesn't, to the best of my knowledge, does not include a field project.
I cannot confirm nor deny that. I know there was a field originally. Whether that field has carried through, I couldn't tell you.
No.
It has not. Okay. I don't, so that it's going through the CM process. I do not know where their final cost is estimated right now. They obviously are proceeding and their value engineering as they need to. So we'll have to, I don't want to say we'll have to wait and see, but we'll have to wait and see where they land.
Mr. Conde, could you explain to the people listening about what ride offers per square foot versus the existing conditions today?
So in previous presentations, we identified the rides cost per square foot. I don't know the number off the top of my head. 600? It's around $600 a square foot. We're projecting more like $800 a square foot, and that's what we have planned for. So there is a delta. And like I said, we're trying to be prudent and conservative, right? I didn't want to bring to you a project that was only $600 a square foot because you would not be able to afford the building. Yes.
This is more of a comment. So I do residential mortgages. I've been doing that for 18 years in town here. And I can tell you from actual experience that people are not coming to South Kingstown, relocating because of two things. And the main thing is the high school. A good portion of the people I deal with and actually run the division for all of Rhode Island. It's about $300 million worth of production. It's fact. It's not theory. It's not conjecture. It's actual people. It's URI professors coming from Alabama and looking at where they're going to land. And when you have little kids, they're looking at where they're going to graduate from. And in some cases, like this last one from just last month, all it took was for them to drive around the school and talk to a few people in town that have kids in the school. I graduated one last year. I've got one who's a freshman. When we talk about things like the bathrooms, I mean, all you have to do is talk to somebody that has kids that are in the school and you fully understand how bad it is. And the reputation, that reputation is out there. So it's not even just keeping the people that are here from going to the technical schools, it's actually attracting people to the town. The high school is the crown jewel of every town. And we're in an economy right now where other towns are building larger high schools. brand new high school. It's a good friend of mine, Arthur Russo, is on the town council of Lincoln. He was actually the chairman of their building committee. He's a good friend of mine, went through the whole process. It's painful. He's a fiscal conservative. He's a Republican. He got through it, and they made it work, and it worked out great. But think about the fact that, and by the way, these aren't even folks that are looking for affordable housing. We have an affordable housing issue in town on top of this. These are people that are choosing towns with much higher taxes because they've been to this school, looked at the school, or spoken to somebody that was here. And that's the bottom line.
Does that affect our property values?
Yeah, and it affects our property value.
I'd like to see, what are the numbers for the Curtis Corner Fields? Do you have a number on that? And also a number on the demolition of the high school?
So we do not have an estimate yet for either one of those projects, but at a high level, we're forecasting, and this may change, but let's say 119 to 120 million for the high school, 5 to 6 million for the Curtis Corner athletic piece. But again, that's being validated by a professional estimator over the next month.
And the demolition cost, you were carrying a cost early on. There was a 3 million ring a bell, 2 to 3 million.
It is extensive because this is a 230,000
big
square
building.
foot building that probably would require some abatement and
Yeah, it's substantial.
significant.
And some of that may vary too, depending on these older schools typically have asbestos, PCBs, other things that have to be carried out in certain ways. So we'll have conservative estimates going in, but that's been built into that 119 to 120 cost.
Hi, just wondering, would it be possible to split the items up on the bond into separate buckets? Just, I think the high school decision about the high school is the most contentious. And I think most people can agree that deferred maintenance stuff needs to be addressed. I would hate for that to not pass through. You know what I mean?
I'll tell you, it's not possible because the way the referendum is being put forth is for 125 million. I think it's 3 specific, if I recall in the language. Now, it does have flexibility of language as far as what the money can be used for. So you're right, we could put something that's for other maintenance. I'm going to be very clear. 125 million is for a new high school with athletic complex. Like, we don't have money. We're not going to have money for other deferred maintenance. But that doesn't mean there's not other ways to address that. RIDE has grants, we have local funding, there's other things to be done. We know that. This is step one. So when people vote, they're going to have to accept the fact that, or trust that we're going to have an approval for other work. But what they're voting on is really for a new high school. That is the project, because we don't want to oversell it. If we have enough money to go paint and do some other things, that's fine, but you've heard the conversation, right? We're already looking at possibly having the value engineer for the high school. So I'm just going to lay it out there that we're not going to have that kind of money to allocate to other. And I know that may not be acceptable to some, depending on where your child is in the system, but that's the truth. It just is.
Any other questions or comments? Like I said, I do appreciate you spending some time with us this morning. We'll go ahead and revise this presentation and include another survey component to it, and we'll post that along with the others. Luke?
So as Phil said, we really do appreciate your time. So some things to look for, and I've asked Phil, I'm always asking Phil for a million things. We talk a lot. Is it on? It's going, all right. Sorry, not close enough. I've asked Phil for a lot. And one of the things I asked him for recently is that very simple breakdown of the impacts of a project. What's the value proposition? So what is the energy savings? What's the perspective? Because we're moving from a very big footprint. And I've seen this recently, I don't get into social media much, but you see the banter going around, like, why would we build a new high school? The existing's there, it's fine. And the truth is, it's not fine from both a functional mechanical way, but just from a sheer size aspect. And I compare it to somebody like an older individual, right? You have this big house that you have a family in, the family has reduced. Now you're stuck with this big house, the roof needs repaired, the mechanicals need repaired, and now you're considering downsizing. At this point, we really do need to right size the building. And that has a real budgetary impact long term. And we're cognizant of that. So it's not just about this flashy building. So I think one of the things we're going to be focusing on is relaying again that value proposition in a very thoughtful, clear way on the why. Because many people just look at what we have. People are always going to say, it's fine, it's there. And the truth is it fine? Maybe for now, but nothing lasts forever. And it's not going to get much better from here. So we'll be trying to do an effective job of that. Any last questions? Really want to thank you. Go ahead. Sure. It's in the plan for evaluation. Is it in the plans for implementation? Not yet. So green building design, how are we considering it? So there's a lot of things with green building design. It can go as simple as insulating really well and the low E windows and making sure you're not escaping, losing what you have to put into the building. But also other, we talked about geothermal, solar, other. I'm a big proponent. I have solar on my house. I drive a full electric truck. I'm all in. But we mentioned this at the school building committee meeting is we also have a budget. And I've invested in solar at my own cost, but it's substantial. And I'm estimating a gain. We're going to have to go through that same thing. I relate it to homeowners because it's what we all go through when we set our budgets, right? Do I have enough money to put the solar on my roof? What's the long-term payout of that? What's the maintenance? What do I have to do when I have to strip those panels off and replace the roof? We'll be talking to Brian Mahoney and others on this from the facilities physical plan aspect as far as a maintenance ability too. If we don't have enough maintenance ability to repair that panel or the geothermal system, what happens when it breaks or something happens? So these are all things we're going to kind of vet out. It's highly likely we'll come up with a hybrid, right? Going full tilt, geothermal, everything sustainable is costly. And we may not be able to get there. What we want to do is say, all right, what's the extreme? What's the minimum? And how much can we move the needle to that far end? And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do that and save us and be able to relay those savings and those opportunities moving forward. Fair enough? I 100% agree. Yeah. Again, I'll relate it to the homeowner, right? I have a certain job. My wife does too. There's a certain point where I'd love to put in geothermal, let's say in my own house, but quite practically, it just doesn't make sense for me. I don't have excess income to be able to do that. We're going to struggle the same thing. We have a set budget and the taxpayers only want to spend so much. We're already asking a lot. We know that. We know this is not easy on taxpayers. It never is. They're giving up a part of their income to invest in their community. So we have to be thoughtful about that and be honest with that. And I think that's what we have to have that honest discussion moving forward is we realize the investment. Dora? Yeah, about the geothermal investment and we're going to be looking at, the good thing is, again, I don't profess to know everything, neither does Phil. He's brought on a firm that has done these systems, geothermal systems, will be able to tell us with a surety, like, is it feasible? What's the cost? And we'll have to make some decisions based on information. Yes, so I think, what presentation was it? Was it fourth? Or last, no, it was 2 weeks ago. Thought it was 2 weeks on the green design. I think it was the fourth. Wasn't, last week was the OPM. So, yeah, so May 4th, we had a whole discussion on green building design. I urge you to go back and look at that video because Phil had a great slideshow explaining what the different levels are and how we're going to approach the process. There's all these sub-decisions that have to be made. And so it's difficult. What I'm trying to do and the building committee is trying to do is thoughtfully go through this and not put, the cart before the horse, so to speak. Because it's very tempting. Everyone wants to jump to the final, right? What's the classroom going to look like? What's my child going to be, their eating experience or the auditorium going to look like? I'm trying to take it from 50 to 60,000 feet down to, when we get to the end, that 5,000 to 1,000 feet. Right now, I think we're about 30. And so we have a lot of process to go. So we're estimating the bond at 20 years right now, which seems to be the sweet spot on. Sure. Well, and it is a good way to look at it. So you look at life cycle costs. The other thing we'll have to look at is, would it make sense to front some additional money now, even at a local level for the long-term payoff? So we go through this, actually, they do this now with lighting. So National Grid or Rhode Island Energy now has a program that they'll retrofit the lighting and do on-bill pay. So you can effectively, by your reduction in your bills, pay for that upgrade. And then eventually you catch up with life cycle and you move forward. So you're reaping the savings, and many school districts have participated. I believe this one has. And Brian has done a lot of retrofits on that. You could look at it that way as well. Like, what are opportunities outside of the bonds to maybe invest and sort of catch up with life cycle over the long term? Because we know that we're going to spend it in tax dollars anyway. So you're right. We have to look at all opportunities. And if we can't afford it through the bond money, is there other opportunities to afford that long-term gain? Go ahead. Yeah, so supportive of geothermal, looking at other monies. I mentioned this earlier, there's a lot of money out there right now, and I did put this out at the last building committee meeting is we're looking to partner more with the school committee and the school department on saying what other funding opportunities are out there. So that can't be driven by the committee so much because we don't have the capacity to do so. So who is looking at this? And it really has to be driven more on the school side, is saying what opportunities are out there and do we have the ability to apply? Because I do think with the Infrastructure Act, is green building design, there is a lot of funding out there that we may be able to tap, again, beyond the bond, that we could leverage, because usually grants require some sort of leverage, right? You have to chip in to be able to get that money. We're going to have 125 million to chip in. So we have no reason that we couldn't leverage additional funding. We do it all the time. Go ahead. Right? Yeah, so that's south. So it's School Street. That's what you're saying? I think you said Columbia. Yeah, okay. what I think what you're seeing a lot of is the gymnasium where it says Rebels, right? So that's the second story of the gymnasium. The idea is to get light into the gymnasium. So it has a different functional purpose. I mean, realizing that windows today are not windows of 50, 100 years ago, there's ways that we can reduce that energy loss. But you're right, south facing, getting that energy in, passive solar and actual solar voltaic panels could be an opportunity. You know, and I'd like to also look at, you know, what about carports? There's been incentives through OER on carports and other. There's a lot of opportunities here. Again, we're at 30,000 feet. So as we whittle down this decision-making process, we're going to continue to look at those. I'm sorry, what? I didn't hear it.
Standard operating to overheat and open windows.
I don't know if that's the current SOP, but
They kind of control what they said.
I mean, schools of today are different than this building. You can't, you know, one thing I would encourage anybody is most school districts are open to giving tours and things. And maybe we should do the same, is some of our neighbors have more upgraded facilities than we do. I think when you look at what the possibilities are, you stop thinking about what you have and you start looking at the possibilities. And that's anyone from in this room watching the video, other, if you really gone into a newer school, you realize how far behind we are. All right. Oh yeah, I mean, the HVAC in this building is, yeah. All right. Well, HVAC has to be done correctly and depending on the team you have. Yeah. So I know Saturday morning, like I said, I'm glad to stay a little bit longer with Phil if you have any offline questions, but we want to thank you. We are available online. Website's only going to get better. And all right, last one, absolutely last. Sure. Yeah. Short answer is yes. So is there a way to express the need, right? And be clear about it? Yes. And right, I know it's tough to keep up with social media because we're sort of at a certain level of planning and social media gets away and they're at the 5,000 feet level and trying to debunk things without them actually even being put out there. What I can say is over the summer, we plan on onboarding an owner's project manager, which will give us a little bit more capacity to be able to redo a website, which is a partial component of the RFQ that went out. We're creating a new website, and the envisionment for that would be to have maybe a section on the need. And it would be very punchy and easy to read and sort of user friendly to get the facts on what has already transpired, because all of this has been talked about for those who want to go back and look at 20 hours of 50 hours worth of meetings. But the truth is, none of us have time for that. So we have to boil months of process down to a infographic that essentially says, here's why. And so that takes some ability and time to do, and we're trying to get the team together. I will put out there that we are going to be looking for people to assist. You don't have to be on the building committee officially to be able to help support the information effort and just put out good information. So pointing people back. And so the committee decided early on is to really use website and points of information, not get engaged in social media this time. So you won't see me on there. I'm not going to go out and debate people on the erroneous facts that they make, I'm just going to point everyone back to that main site and say, if you want the real answer, go here. If you want the real answer, go here. For everything I see, because it's not worth engaging because you're engaging one person at a time. There's ability to engage a mass through one central source of information. And that's sort of the game plan on this, is point everyone back to that single source so everyone gets used to where the real information is and stop engaging in the bantering. Yeah, decision last time was really to keep the housing of the website on the town site and kind of funnel people there. And I don't think it was representative of what could be done for information. So I think we're looking for something very different. Yeah, there's a difference between just providing information. Right now, I will say the website, which is maintained solely by me, is a warehouse of information. If you want it, it's there, but I'm not going to spoon feed it. The site that we'd be going to is more of a spoon fed informational, like it's more of a messaging and saying, okay, we know what you're looking for. Here it is. Right now, I'm kind of dumping information on it because, quite frankly, website design is its own profession, and I'm not a website designer. So, all right, we'll zip it up for today. We're glad to stay around. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.